Well, Ed, was this your first term ever on council?
Well, I started in September 2021 when Mr. Tignelli resigned.
Right.
That's when I was appointed to council.
Yeah, Marcus jumped ship to take a job.
Yeah.
How many times have you run for council before that?
That was the first time,
Yeah.
2018.
And what did it feel like not getting in the first time?
Well, you know, it's I think anybody can acknowledge it's disappointing.
Right.
But you know, it was my first time at it, and I thought, okay, next time up, I knew I was running the next day.
Yeah.
I was going to run for it.
Yeah, you were very close to coming in, right? But
yeah.
How many votes?
There was 200 votes. So,
well, that's close.
And then George Marousas was above me, and he jumped in when with the passing of Mike Anthony, and Tignelli is when I got on board.
Right, the attrition. Yeah. Why are you running again? What's your goal?
Well, why am I running again? Because I just really got my feet wet into the whole aspect of council, and I got a lot of ideas I think I'd like to be able to put forward. So,
like what?
Well, one idea that has been a big topic has been the twin pad, and it's certainly something that I've been on top of since I first saw the plan, and I did not like it at all.
Yeah.
And I come from a bit of a hockey background. You know, not that the arena will just be for hockey; it'll be for all. There's ringette, there's all kind of
local
ball
sports.
hockey,
Yep.
And you can do other things in there, trade shows and all that. But when that came up, and I looked at the design, a Y design, and I go, "Where's the center? Where do you go?" You know, I used to do a lot of hockey tournaments at double rinks when I ran the Sportsman's Hockey League, and then also I would help out with Mo Bedard when he had big brothers and big sisters, and they had the middle, so you played, you know, on either side, and then once you're over, you come up and have a beer or a drink, whatever, wine, and you'd be able to watch the game. It was a fundraiser. It helped the Big Brothers, Big Sisters organization, and you know, I'm thinking, how will we be able to do this? You know, like. And you can't expand onto that design, because if you wanted to put on an indoor court facilities like Canada is doing, which you could do with a box design, you could set that up for that. You couldn't do that. Well, I don't know how you could do it with this wide design. It would be pretty cumbersome to get away with that. But so that really bothered me. And you know, I know everybody's been talking about the cost and factors and all that, but to me, I'm looking at this could be like a white elephant when.
Pure practicality. It
just has no, it's not practical. And I talked to another architect on it, and the design is good. They were told this is what they needed. They never explored a box design, which is what Sault Ste. Marie's doing for 20 million less or so.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is a case where the architects were thinking about the awards they're going to get after, like the hospital. That's to my you know, layman view, was very impractical to go that route.
There's another example, yes.
And even the award-winning design of the Bill Barber complex, they let the sun in one whole side. You'd have half the thing was melted ice, right? So engineering has to be practical, I think, and expansion is right, because when you look at that Y design, whatever you would expand onto would bring people further away from the parking lot.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm always thinking about the seniors and disabled having to, you know, go far.
Yeah.
Even at Omichelle for a lot of things, right?
Yes.
So,
and I know people talk about Omichelle being way out there, and I'm thinking it's part of North Bay. And I've always said Ferris has been underappreciated by the city in the past. I mean, you got Case Populaires down there for a bank. You've got 2 grocery stores, I believe, like Metro and No Frills, and it's like you got a third of the population, and you got very limited. And I've talked to, you know, being in my field in real estate, and I've talked to commercial realtors, and they've always indicated that Ferris had an issue with not having enough large commercial space. There's a lot of little small stuff along Lakeshore Drive, but no big parcels. So if you put the arena down on Omichelle, then you've got the arena and you've got the casino, kind of like an anchor tenant on a mall, so to speak. And then you draw, because there's lots of land down there, and there's a lot of applications. When I was on planning advisory, there's a lot of applications that came through. So that's all ready to go, so you can put commercial down there. Hotels will go down there, and it's right off the highway. So I know it's far from someone who lives up on Airport Hill to come down there, but you got to look at the people who live in the lower end of the south end of Ferris, who've got to go to double rinks and all that all the time. So I think we have to be fair, and Ferris needs something. We're too top heavy. I don't know if you drive much along that corridor with Algonquin and the bypass and all that. That's horrendous sometimes to get up there. I feel like I'm in Toronto, and that's because we're too top heavy, and we need to balance the city out. That's why I think first of all, I think it needs to be in Ferris, but I've always said Eau Michelle, and I've had some good friends argue with me at this point. They says, why would you want it down there? And they said, it's too far away, and I'm going, it's 15 minutes away. I mean, I think we forget that what it's like to live in Toronto, where they travel, nothing to travel an hour.
Now, I'm on the record as saying I don't like that end of it, and especially when you're calling it a community center, right?
Yeah.
That just bugs me.
Yeah, I don't think of it as community center.
And when I was coaching baseball, I remember the first summer we had to use Eau Michelle. And of course, I didn't like the design. Everything was wrong about a lot of things there. But I was picking up the kids of single parent families that didn't finish work in time, so that they bring their kid. They used to bring them right over here, very close. It added another 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever, for some people. I was picking up kids and bringing them out there because they couldn't catch the bus in time to get there for practice.
Yeah.
So that's just a personal thing. I kind of got over it.
Yeah.
But I'm not coaching.
I think with the busing, I think we can
you can figure something out.
We can alleviate that issue and all that.
And I do see your point of that end. There's a lot of money in the ground over there for infrastructure for a reason. Yeah. And there's future considerations down there. So I'm not opposed to developing that area. Yeah. And Ferris can expand there, and it's
affordable land.
As long as we have something that is actually a community center.
Yes.
So as long as a couple other pieces of the puzzle are kept and considered.
So I think, because obviously we would not just have the West Ferris to start considering. We know Double Rinks is getting near end of life, and so, and I've always said, if we spend too much money on the one if West Ferris twin pad, and it's going to be a twin pad arena, community center. You can call it community center if you want, but it's a twin pad arena, and we could expand on that later on. But at this point in time, it should be just focused on a simple design, a box design. And so now when we go to figure out what we're going to do for Double Rinks in the future, that's where I'd like to see us get involved again, because Canadore had reached out, and I don't know what happened, why that fell apart, but I'd like to explore that again. Because I think they could take a facility and make it a community center. Maybe we could get on board as a kind of a combination.
If not Canadore, somewhere else. I think Canadore ship sailed there.
That may have sailed, but however we look, but I think we could find a partner maybe on that.
There's things that could be done.
But that's a project that we have to look at for tomorrow. Right now, we got to concentrate on what we have now. And now I know Eau Michelle. I'm not set firmly on Eau Michelle. If we can find a location that can expand, my concerns with West Ferris Arena is really you'd need to buy out a few homes there. I mean, where do you put if you want to expand on an indoor facility? Because you need acreage for all that.
Yeah.
And if you put it here, you're really tightened out where you can develop out from there. You may be able to do it on Booth Road somewhere, or one of those, some property in there, I'm not sure. But wherever it may be, I believe it has to be Ferris.
I hear you. As long as whatever changes are going to be taking place in the near future, that they adhere to the public hearings and meetings, and it's a community consultation for real.
Yeah.
I find that a lot of people are making their decisions up and they have an idea, but I don't know if everybody's in on it. I think everybody should be in on it and sold on it and be happy with the plan before it goes on, right?
And I know one of the concerns people say, well, we've got a homeless situation. We are a multitasking city. We should be able to handle more than just one item. And we have a $130, $140 million budget, so it's covering a lot of territories. Obviously, it's a lot of payroll, but certainly I think we can, and I have a concept that I'd like to do downtown, which is currently you can see some of that starting to happen with officers on patrol. But what I'd like to see, and I know the police department is talking about that, having a satellite, and I've talked about that for a long time. I've wanted a satellite station downtown like we used to have. We used to have a small police station down there. So you could have that with a camera-based system that would have cameras all over the commercial areas. You could monitor all that right from there, have someone permanently there. And you have an officer on the bike patrol and an officer on foot, walking, wherever he can cover in his foot patrol, and then the bike will expand out to Castle Street and all that areas where we have some issues there.
Well,
So-
the homelessness, the addictions is a whole bunch of different pies.
Yes,
Right?
and I've always said that there's not one solution to all that, but I think the city has to start on their end of the thing, because obviously we don't have the mental health resources. That's, Ontario, that's the Ontario government that's backing us with our hospital, our regional hospital. We can do kind of a partnership, but I think we need to secure the downtown, because there are some businesses that are looking at some opportunities down there, and there's ideas coming out, and I think they'll see something in the future. But we have to,
There has to be an appearance
it
of
has
safety.
to be safety, and so it's not so much, you're not gonna just push out homeless people away from the downtown easy enough. And you don't wanna do that, because you just push them to another area, but you wanna deal with the issues, and you want people to feel safe. That's the key thing. When people tell me that they feel safer walking down Oak Street than they do down Main Street, I mean, that's such a real flip from back 50 years ago, when Oak Street was always considered a tougher section of the downtown core. Now it's very, it's got some beautiful stores and that.
Well, the fact of the matter is, not every homeless person is dangerous, and those aren't the issues. There's a criminal element of gangster type level,
Yeah.
street thugs that do their dealing down there, and that's
Yeah.
because they lived in that area because it's the cheapest rent. There's a lot of factors, right?
Yes.
But
No,
a
yeah.
police presence is definitely.
It would help, and I
needed.
think if you had
Yeah.
a station down there with a monitoring system, and so one of the person asked, well, how are you gonna pay for this? And then I'm saying, well, the casino. The casino's got some major revenue that's gonna come to the city, and it hasn't been apportioned yet. I know there's probably some councillors have eyes on where they'd like to see some of that money spent. But my viewpoint is, if we take 500,000, which is probably less than half of what we're gonna get per year, and put it down into this satellite police station with a task force that coordinates with, say, mental health and all the other different organizations.
Well, there's a lot. There's a lot of puzzle pieces in
Yes.
the downtown area.
It's not an easy,
Like the attempt to do the transitionary stuff up by Chippewa has raised everybody's hackles, right?
Yeah.
And that was done quickly without a tender and without any planning, really.
yeah, so I remember when that property came up, I actually was there representing a client, so I went to review the property, and I was told by the city that we could expand to add more, because my client was looking to add on more apartment buildings. And so it was a perfect fit, but he didn't get in on the bidding high enough or whatever. And so it was sold, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, we have this facility that's right across from the school. It's right near Barclay House. It did make sense to me in that, So that's one issue, and there's some long leases there, so that's a difficult one to extricate yourself out of. But I think I'd like to see us put a pause on anything further there. But obviously, that's a DSAP decision, which council does have representation on there, but not a complete representation.
Well, I thought in the mayoral debate, I think Peter Chirico said something about he wants to switch that out and make it affordable senior housing or something like that. I don't think that's going to happen very quickly.
Yeah,
There's
I don't know
millions
that,
and millions
yeah.
of dollars sunk into
Yeah.
the ground there.
And there's a lease in there, so I don't know what you're looking at cost to get out of that, and that's pretty difficult, so.
I think that was a little bit of a misstep, that whole plan there.
Yeah, and it's disappointing, because I went on, when I first got on council, I went on the mobile crisis unit, which is a police officer and a psych hospital nurse. And it was I was there the whole day. It was very, eye-opening. I mean, we went and we were searching for one girl who was, threatening herself, and it was just a really very difficult to kind of imagine that some of these people go through. And some of these kids are very vulnerable and all that, eh? But as we were going down Chippewa, the officer had said to me, he says, that Chippewa is considering putting a fence around the whole perimeter. And I'm going like, so we just shifting cost and all that, because they do have problems there. And I have a friend of mine who has their child at the school at the end of Chippewa, the French school, the French public school. I think it's public. And on the way down, he said he saw someone shooting up, and just off the site. And on his way back, after he dropped the kid off, a few minutes had passed, he saw an ambulance there, and they were dealing with an overdose. And that's very terrifying to kids, to see that. And I
Tough
really
love
think,
though, eh? Like, I'm kind of 50-50 on it because it's part of our world, and it's a good education for teenagers.
Yes,
and
it's
people
definitely a wide eye opener.
And that could be, until they figure out a different solution, they should make it part of the education part of
Yeah.
students, even the young ones, because they see all kinds of stuff on social media that's worse than that. And these are people. And I think we're into some really big problems with the type of drugs these people are addicted to right now. Rewiring their brains, and it's not a good thing. I think the solutions are escaping a lot of the professionals because this is a different thing.
Well, I constantly learn about how this whole issue that's been developing. And just to give an example, I'm at the corner store, and there's an officer in front of me, and then there's another individual, and he's pretty skinny looking, and he's got about 4 or 5 cartons of chocolate milk. And the officer turns back to me, says, "That's someone who's on meth." He says, "They need that sugar high." And it was kind of, I would never have understood that, but you could tell the person very skinny, because obviously on some of those drugs that just wears the whole body out, to the point where
And they don't eat much.
And
we got, but it's not the only problem. And I don't know, I kind of get a little uncomfortable feeling when people say North Bay's going to hell in a handbasket, because it's not. And it's not different than a lot of communities. And I think it's kind of like these elections bring up all these issues, and a lot of people say exaggerations of how bad it is for points. But I think they're doing North Bay a bit of a disservice. I've been a lot of places.
It's all over. So to give you an example, I went to the Toronto soccer game, and we went to the keg after for dinner, and right out in front of the keg was a guy lying down. He had the whole thing there, and but no one felt afraid because you could see police officers are all around. So I think that's the key thing. Everybody's got this issue. We've got this issue. We may have some issues. I have some concerns with being relocated to North Bay. That's something I think the city needs to address. That's always a concern of mine when a DSAB in Guelph is sending someone up here.
Well, there was a COVID purge from a lot of the cities that was anywhere you want to go is better than in a city, and North Bay on paper looked like it had services, but nobody really cared or checked to see that our services were topped out.
So, and you do hear stories, and I heard this from the police, that they're getting dropped off. Even one case I heard there was a Barrie police, 2 officers came up with someone, just dropped them off. And I have really ethical concerns with that.
Oh yeah.
There's a moral.
Was that true though?
Well, you never know, but I have heard the officer said that they're being dropped off, and I've heard that from a number of different sources. I know someone who was volunteering at the food one on Castles there, the gathering place, and she was working there, and she says, just a vehicle. She was working around. There says a vehicle pops up, nice looking car. Out pops a homeless person, someone who's a vulnerable individual, and they came in there and they were from out of town. They were dropped off.
Yeah.
So then that really bothers me.
I didn't really believe it it was that bad. I did ask somebody that is really connected with the street and has been there himself, and he's cleaned up and whatnot, and he was telling me that his connections and people he knows did explain that during COVID they were just getting everybody they could out of the cities. But that is a different issue. But I hitchhiked here on welfare when I came to North Bay, the '86. I had probably more going for me than some people, but I was still on a cane from an operation and on welfare. So I kind of don't like. You can come to North Bay and make a life for yourself, even when you're at that level. But of course, these people are coming up with more issues than I had.
Yeah.
Although I had some issues.
Well, and it's not that we want to demonize anyone. There's ones, I've talked to some health professionals, the mental health and all that, and there are, if you break it down, there's a portion of individuals that want help, and they're all out there. And then there's a portion that leave me alone, and I don't want housing, some want housing. So you've got all these different groups, different how they view things and all that. And what I guess what gets more play is the ones that get arrested and then
The criminal addicts.
yeah, and they get thrown back out into the out to the world again, and they're then you see when you read their in Bay Today or in the Nugget, they'll print that the breach of cognizance.
Yeah.
You see that
there's no room for them. Are you
There's
in
no
favor
room.
of a bigger and better jail? I am.
I'm in favor of.
With services,
So I've always believed that
not just a jail, but with
a
services.
mistake was the psych hospital closing down, and I watched a good PBS show on this, and they were talking about that, and they were interviewing psychiatrists who said there was a trend to get everybody out in society, but what you have is this percentage of group that if you throw them out, it's like throwing them into the wolves. They don't know, they're so afraid, and people I've talked to who used to work up at the psych hospital, they said, they felt comfortable, they felt secure, they got their medication on time, and now they get thrown out, they're in the downtown core, and people are screaming at them, and it's just, their lives are like chaos.
Yeah, no,
And-
there's
and so they don't know which way to go.
chronic mental health issues need to be dealt with differently than other things, and throwing them on the street without those supports, and even with those supports, is cruel, really.
Yeah.
More cruel than it was.
And that's the thing is there wasn't any supports, there wasn't that much,
That's
support.
different than a jail, though.
Yeah.
But
But I do agree that if you break the law and keep breaking the law, obviously, it's time to sit in jail
yeah,
for whatever period of time it needs to be and get treatment at that time.
rehabbed and given a chance,
Yeah.
a fighting chance, because
Yeah.
when you do, when there's no room for them in the justice system,
Yeah.
they have no other choice but to continue doing what got them where they
Yeah.
were, right? Well, they have choices, but
Yeah.
they're not clear-headed enough.
And the difficulty is with the police to come and pick up, they're just overwhelmed.
Yeah, no, they shouldn't be doing just that. Like that's a big portion of their job. I've talked to a few of them, and it's the mix of social services, mental health, and whatnot. That's not what they're trained and supposed to be doing.
No.
And we wouldn't necessarily need as many police officers if we had taken care of some of those social problems
Yeah.
a different way.
That's where I'd like to see some other departments maybe come in there. I know the fire department had reached out with a questionnaire, and I thought maybe we could get some help from the fire department in terms of if they have people with medical, and they do go right now, because usually you've got little fires are starting, kitchen fires or whatever like that. So I would certainly, I've told them I'd like to sit down and talk to them. I think that we could incorporate some of that department into making this less of an issue, I don't know how.
I think it's an all hands
But,
on deck kind of thing.
Because
it's a community issue.
It's a community issue,
yeah.
and I think the police are overwhelmed, so we need some help.
Well, paramedics, firefighters, police, they're basically 40% of their job is picking up the pieces of poor policy decisions and funding, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So what else you got on your big plan? For
So the other
getting back
thing,
in council?
yes. So one of the other things I've talked to, I spoke to Brian Risk, who does a lot of
Yep.
concert down at the waterfront. There's a lot has been going on, and I asked him. I says, our theater that we have down there, or not theater, but the little concrete, I call it the concrete wall, because that's basically what it is.
Yeah.
They have something like, maybe not as elaborate as Bell Park and Sudbury, but they've got funding, government funding there. So I'm wondering if we could approach and get the government in there where we could fund a bigger, shell, amphitheater shell.
Something that sheltered you from the
Something
rain?
that sheltered you from the rain, that was with its back to the thing, to the water, to the lake, and going from there and having some rooms in there, and so you could have some bands there, and also then you have Dream Code. That'd be a great place where they could do little outdoor plays, I think there's a lot of opportunity down there. But I also like to see a little more development, not crazy development. I don't want a Wasaga Beach or something like that. But I always said, when you go down to the waterfront, if you run out of something, you have to leave the area a lot of times, There should be maybe few more food concessions there, some way, shape or form. But also, if I'm run out of suntan, especially if you're coming to visit. If you say you've got a single person with 2 kids, they go down there and they're young kids and they go down to the waterfront and they forget suntan lotion, they have to leave. And if when you have kids, you realize at some point, it's just not worth it and you end up leaving.
A convenience store of some sort. I'm not necessarily thinking a permanent bar business down there would be the idea, because you're just competing with the downtown. It's
Yes.
like
No, and what I mean is something.
I know, but somebody else had
closer.
said something like that, right?
Yes.
So I would think that there is some room for development, just like you're saying, as far as business and availability of products. But I don't see at the waterfront giving up public land for a bar.
No, I'm not saying give up public land for a bar, but I do think somewhere around there, like to encourage that. So you don't have to go too far.
Oh yeah, you're right on.
And I'm not saying right on the lake or something like that.
Well,
But
the Heritage Railway should be able to make money and do that, don't you think? It's right there. There's a
it's right
parking
there,
lot.
yeah. So there's different things. And I've always said, I grew up in the restaurant business, Valenti's. So there's a pack mentality when it comes to restaurants. And that's why McEwen is so busy with a lot of restaurants. And you might say, well, you must hate that. But no, when you think of restaurants, you go up to that area, right? And so when you come to maybe the downtown core, if you have a few more choices, not to say I'm trying to create unnecessary competition for down there, but the more that are down there, the more people you will draw down there.
Well, there's something to that, because just because there's 5 restaurants within a block, it gives you choices. And if you don't like your service you got at one, now you know that there's others to go to. So there's not a problem with that. There's a lot of people that invested heavily to further businesses, so any new business shouldn't be getting too much of a gift. But no, there's some work to be done.
But I think as you get more, so if you have like that pack mentality, so you get more people down there, and when you get more people down at the waterfront and downtown core, that fear that comes with individuals, vulnerable individuals down there, maybe harassing people, or being just making, they're afraid to be in that vicinity. So if you get more people down there, that fear goes away, because in crowds, people feel better.
True. Got a couple questions for you that was, Peter's got he's the front runner for mayor, and he's got a platform that, 2 things that he says that I'd like to bounce off of you.
Sure.
Just for your thoughts. He wants to be able to pick the chairs. Is that what I read?
So, yes. Well, actually, that is a new law that Ontario government had brought in, giving the mayor more powers.
Not North Bay yet. You agree with that?
So my concerns with that, I still think council needs to, confirm any of his or her choices, if it's Joanne.
Yeah.
And I believe that's important that council's involved. But I've always said, traditionally the number one votes is the person who's in charge of financing. So you could have someone on council who's a chartered accountant and they're in 7th place. Well, I would, if I'm having someone run a financial, I want a chartered accountant if I could choose. If you look at any major companies, a lot of CEOs were chartered accountants. I have a friend who was a chartered accountant and was a VP at CTV. So those opportunities come because of their skill and numbers and all that. And that's what you really need with finances. You need someone to wade through all that, who will be able to,
I agree that council should have, I think council should have a say on who runs the chairs.
Yeah.
Specifically budget chief, because quite often a popularity vote might put in somebody in that doesn't. And in the past, there's 3 examples that I can think of, or I've been told about, where the top vote getter bowed out and let Dick Donnelly do it because he was well versed in legalities.
So there's a good example right there.
Yeah, there's 3 of them.
That rarely, that doesn't happen. I can't remember. I remember Dick Donnelly and
I think even Don King did.
Don King.
And Lynn Bennett, maybe?
Could have been, yeah.
Or there might have been another counselor, woman counselor, I can't think of her name. But they got the top vote, but they knew that it was best handled. And if you have a strong committee, it's
Yeah.
not, the chair, the deputy, the budget chief, doesn't get to make that many
No.
decisions.
They do have certain powers as a
Yeah,
chair.
yeah.
But you would think someone who with a good financial background like that will be open to, allowing.
A little bit of
input.
finance for sure, and I'm not sure
I'm not
about
sure
the
about
accounting
I'm
thing.
not sure about the other two chairs.
Yeah.
But I do believe that the finance chair should be chosen in some form or another, and not as the number one vote getter.
I agree with you there. I don't think the mayor should be getting the choice, I should think it's the council choice.
Yeah.
Personally. I don't agree with the province changing the rules so mayors can have carte blanche, and then you have to have 2/3 of the vote to change
Yeah.
things, because that's going to be interesting if that's the case.
Yeah, it's gonna throw some dynamics into a council, and I don't know how it's gonna work out. I think you're gonna see a lot of hiccups when that rolls around.
Well,
and
there's
be-
a
and
big
you-
decisions, and if it's just one person's vision that's kind of bringing it forward, I don't think that's going to work out too well. There's just too much going on.
Yeah,
Um,
but like I say, my big point was is finance should be run by someone with a financial background, if you could,
Financial understanding,
understandings.
but more importantly, civic understanding.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah, because when you're dealing with the city, if you're a business, you always have a moral perpetuity, I guess, to the way you operate business, but you don't have to, right? The city has to have a moral background. When they make a decision, it's got to be taking into consideration people who may not be the majority,
Yeah.
right? People talk about the arena, for example, it's, I don't use that or something like that, but that's the whole nature of a community. The benefit, like my kids are all grown up, they're 28 and 30, and so I don't need to pay, like when I'm paying school taxes. Well, I'm paying school taxes because, I'm contributing to the community.
Yeah.
If I can't say, well, my kids are no longer in school anymore, I don't want them, or I don't play hockey anymore, so I don't think I should pay for arena. It's all community.
Yeah, that's a libertarian type view where people think that they can opt in and out of the social contract.
It's all, it's all for one,
You know how I
it's like the
explain that to
Musketeers.
people is that if you're not financing community sports,
Yeah,
you better be getting ready to finance more jails.
yeah,
I don't believe our jails are full of people that didn't go through organized sports, high school sports
Yeah.
and stuff like that. I think it's an important part of growing up that gives you an idea of what character is expected of you. It's not the only way, like
Yeah.
theater, arts, there's all these things that are very important in
Yeah.
raising decent kids, right?
yeah.
So,
Well, that was one of the other things too. When I started on council, I went and had a full day at the Capitol Center, and went through the whole. I was quite surprised in the lower levels of Capitol Center how it needs some serious repairs in there. There's water rolling in the basement areas. I mean, I think we need that. That's an important part of culture, history. Like I'm chair of the John Quince Museum. And I really think that brings a lot of people, it's one little entity that is amongst the group, that brings people down to the area.
it's part of
And it's part of
the crown jewels of the community, and if it's treated as such, and everybody sees that the big picture of all these different things working together.
Yeah.
So you'd see a lot of. I was just down there a week or two ago taking a picture, and the people that were coming in, they were tourists. They were there for a reason. That was the first thing that brought them here, and then they were doing all these other things, right? So that's an example.
Well, that's happened with the Quince Museum,
Yeah, that's what I'm
and
talking
to
about.
give you one little example, one person came up, her mother was a big Quince fan, and collected all kinds of stuff. She'd never been to North Bay, this lady, she was down in Barrie, never been up here, which is somewhat surprising when you hear some people who've never been it's only a couple hours away, right? But anyways, this girl was telling how she said, my mom promised me to come up and see the museum. She came up and stayed 3 nights at the hotel that's down the street there on Oak. And went on the boat, went to see the North Bay Museum, and it was all strictly because of the Quince Museum.
Yeah.
So it's one little entity that draws someone here who spends some money. And we get a lot of people who roll into town and make it a point to come see the museum. And, so then we push them off and say, you gotta go see the North Bay Museum. you know, and if they got young kids, the carousels and things like that, so.
And you have to have those things operating and thriving
Yeah.
for people to add to their itinerary while
Yeah.
they're here, right? So, what else is on your agenda? Now, I noticed that you were a little contrarian in some of the developments you voted against.
So,
give me-
yeah, I'll
give me
give
some
you an
vision.
example. So there was one that was done on Bain Drive.
Yeah.
And that,
Yeah, watch that.
the main floor, like the ground level where it's gonna be put is anywhere from, it's pretty high up. It's like 4 to 6 stories high up if you were to equate it to a building. And then you're gonna add a building on top of that. That is gonna be so high. And they had space down below, which I thought was more appropriate. It was a little more cost involved, but I thought it was more appropriate. The one that I voted against also was at the school, the Brook Street School.
Yep.
And I just felt, I really find that area is heavy traffic, and it's very difficult now. I find it's too much traffic going through there, because I go through that to cut through, to get into Birch Haven or whatever. And I take that route all the time, you know, when you go down John Street and swing around and all that. So you get a lot of cars, a lot of traffic there. And I just felt that I would like to see a little smaller venue there, or building there. I understand we need housing, but there are a lot of applications that came through for apartments that still haven't come to fruition yet, so. It's cost, when it comes to putting up buildings right now, it's not cheap. And I know when people talk about affordable housing, I'd like to see more affordable housing. I'm not against that, and I know that may, like you say, sounds contrary to what I believe in, but I want to see it done right. And one of the other things, one of the bases for deciding on things like that building at that school location, old school location, was that the government of Ontario had come out with a policy statement, and it was released just as the pandemic was hitting, and it was about intensifying, building in and all that, and I'm going, but these people all coming up here, and from real estate, I know this, they're all coming up here to get away from that. And here we are, it's almost like that policy is just, it's no longer applies. We're in a different, you know, the pandemic changed North Bay. We have grown because of the pandemic. And, you know, and now it's crucial that we do things right for those people that have come to be part of our city. But that's just the way I feel. I know it's more expensive when you spread out, but it's the nature of what people want. That's why they like the city. That's why I like the city.
Well, let's be honest here. It costs more to have more, and affordable housing is by nature packed together.
Yeah, and it will be. So I think you can get some areas, like I say, when we talked about the Twin Pad Arena down in Ferris, you could have some, we could allocate certain areas down there where you want more intensive, whether it's apartments or townhouse style in certain areas there. And I think that's where you can get more economies of scale, because you need to be able to have the core cost getting into affordable housing has got to be reasonable, and it hasn't been lately. And so it includes land, and West Ferris land is a lot cheaper than an airport. I mean, you go up to airport and you pay $120,000 for a lot. You won't get $120,000 down in Ferris for a single family lot. So you got to work on it's a numbers game to be able to get that affordable housing.
Well, I know even the price of building lots in East Ferris has gone crazy.
Yeah, well, it's just a
Yeah.
sign of the times.
Yeah, if you want to get out in the sticks there, you're going to have to pay for it now.
And for a long time, I used to track, you know, as a realtor, I tracked our house prices. And I've always said, you know, people would talk about our house prices are too high, but I used to say, you got to go and check out other cities. And they found out about us, and there was the pandemic that pushed a lot of people here, and they were looking and thinking, these are cheap.
Pandemic and the tail end of some cheap interest rates.
Yes, and the interest rates,
Oh my.
which is now adjusting.
Yeah, well, it's crazy for some.
So-
I feel bad for those that.
And it was a little too hectic, and that was one of the things too, I talked about the arena, why pushing it off, because I don't believe, you know, they say, well, it's gonna cost more in the future. Well, that's a traditional, you know, things get more expensive, but right now, if you're building, it's very expensive. Steel, you know, all those costs. I'm building a house, and I saw wood wafer boards drop from $60 to $30 in a span of about 5 months.
Yeah. Like it peaked
So
in COVID.
you gotta,
Supply issues.
you know, when you're
Yeah.
building it, and I've always believed that the city should be spending their resources and in times when it's rougher, it's like a federal and provincial social economics. The government should spend when there's a bad time and pull back when there's not bad time, because the private sector's coming in there and they're building up that whole market. So I think with North Bay, you don't have the same kind of concept as you would as a federal or provincial, but you could still do it on a smaller scale where, you know, we do the arena when it is. So if we went into a recession next year, that's when you want to build an arena, because I think that's when cost factors are a lot better.
I can imagine that you're going to see the tenders for that white elephant down in Omichelle going to be pretty high. It's going to be making the decision for you.
And one of the other things too about, you know, Michelle, is I really believe that it needs to be, we do screen, you know, tenders, right, process to make sure you're capable of doing that. But the arena has been proposed as being something very complicated, and it's not.
One of the least complicated.
Aside from the ice plant, which is going to be handled by a specific subcontractor, who's, you know, engineering, that's going to develop all that and design that. The rest of the buildings that still shell anybody. We have a couple of contractors who may not bid on this, but they have been removed from the bidding process.
I believe you're correct in that the city's policies on those things were restrictive and unnecessarily so.
And brings the cost up.
Yeah.
If you get someone who's local building, because it is still shelled, you get engineering drawings, you follow them, they get inspected. If things are not up to snuff, it's you know, it's going to be someone's going to pay for that, but.
Yeah.
You know,
well, I remember people saying, "Oh, we studied this enough." I'm like, "No, you didn't."
No. And that's one of the things I wish that we would do more of. The arena, I wish that had been. See, we never looked at the box design. It was never costed out, and the whole concept was, well, we got rock there, and we're going to save $500,000 or $400,000 in blasting costs. Yes, but it's more expensive to do and go around it and do this plan. I mean, everybody we blast when we get rock in this city. It's the nature of the.
You're building on swamp and rock.
We're in the Canadian Shield, you know.
We've learned how to build on swamp and rock, I think, by now.
So, and that is a concern, and I would want to make sure that the building is in proper location so that we don't have that issue, because you have that with the police station, which is, you know, coming down the pipe to be replaced because
a number of buildings.
You know, they're sitting on a rock and they're sitting on a softer, well, regular ground and then a rock, you know, so you get that shift. And, you know, so I think we need to make sure that that's going to work out right for box design. But I've been down there multiple times, you know, I've got it on my website with some videos and all that. And I've just shown that, you know, why not just do a simple, what we need, not what we wish for. You know, like you say, the community center, we need a twin pad arena in this city because you need to replace West Ferris. And I know people talk about, well, why can't we fix West Ferris? I mean, they're propping that thing up. I know that. I know they're propping that thing up. It's going to get to a point where our liability is getting pretty crazy for that arena. And so at some point you got to make that, you know, make that change. And you don't want to go to a single arena because it's not efficient. Double rinks cost the city less money than West Ferris does. We subsidize double rinks more.
And the gardens?
And the gardens is another matter. Now, there's another question people have been asking me. You know, Sports North Bay asked, what would you do to improve the situation of Memorial Gardens? And there's only one way to improve that situation, the clock. So you have to decide, can you fix that and get a return on that investment? Otherwise, you're going to have the same situation you have now. There's no bands are going to come in there to play it, because I've talked to a promoter, someone who's been involved in it for a long time, and he said the clock is an issue that 75% of the participants in that event can't see the band properly. So if that's the issue, then we've got to deal with that. And it was talked about doing that, but because of the nature of what went down on Memorial Gardens, it was like, don't add any more dollars to the cost. And I'm not saying we should add more dollars, but if you want to fix it, this is the way we got to go. And we have to figure out whether we can cover that expense over a long term, over a 20-year period, and get a payback on it. If we can, then we can go forward with it. But if it's not, then we have to figure some other option out.
Are you against any further study and consideration of a second pad at Gardens?
So that's one of the things the Memorial Gardens behind there was a landfill. They used to dump stuff there. So the ground has issues. And so I've always thought, yeah, maybe someday we could have had a pad there, but you have to put in another road probably off of Fisher Street, which requires a bridge. And a bridge, is those things then, especially with Chippewa Creek, I don't know, could be $10 million for a bridge, So you're running into, and then all of a sudden you're going to need a bigger parking lot, and then you're just taking out the field, which we spent a lot of money to bring that field to where it is. And then you've got baseball. I mean, I've always envisioned that place as a park, something like a Central Park, where we need to expand a little more things there. I don't know what that would be, but certainly you could put a basketball court in that area. So something as a community area.
So you think there's enough information that negates the possibility of a second pad at Gardens?
I think a second pad would be expensive.
Yeah.
That's my concern. So if someone can show me that it would work, then I would I've always said, I'll look at an idea. It doesn't matter whether I don't even like a particular person. If someone who comes to me, I've always said this, sometimes because it's happened on council, certain individuals have not been allowed to speak there. And I feel that's a disservice to us as a city. We need to have that person in there. They may come up with 20 ideas, and I hate 19 of them, or I don't really think they're just, not really realistic. And they have that one idea that might be perfect or needs a little tweaking. So you've lost that opportunity for that one idea that might, develop into something that's beneficial to the city.
At the very least, if council can't figure out that and can't feel comfortable with the commoners coming up and wasting their time, there should be at least a speakers bureau of some sort where people can directly put something on the website about their ideas if it needs certain sort of, just politeness, right?
Well, that's why, town halls. Now, I know they do town halls, but they don't really get a lot of input on those. They get a very poor show up. I don't know whether that's we're marketing properly. I really think we need to push our council meetings out there. Like, we need a better system in there for the internet. Like, it's a relatively people.
I think we're just heading to the point where it's actually
getting better, and we actually just approved to spend more money there.
Yeah.
Because I think you get the word out. What you call the transparency issues that people always view us as, and I always think we need to get the message out better, and we need to watch how we restrict things like freedom of information. I really think we waste too much resources on things on freedom of information requests that are going to get approved for the most part. We need to make
in the end they will, yeah.
They get approved in the end, or at least we have to be realistic and say that's going to get approved. So let's make sure we
make it easier.
We make it easier. And in the past there's been items where people have said, well, what about this? And I'm it's I know sometimes people don't like to bring up, but the whole with the CAO, when people were complaining about that, and my perspective was, well, that is a severance package. Why don't we just say it's a severance package? You can argue that you don't like how much severance was paid out there. That should be the argument, and not whether it was shows up in the Sunshine List as a unique name. And it's just it's a severance payment. We need to identify it as that, and then we can argue whether we gave too much money.
I think there was a couple severance packages that didn't make it into the public realm properly.
Yes.
So I'm not too sure the system is.
Well, anything like the CEO comes in, because that's well over 100.
And there was a director.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if everybody wants all that. Like, we as a public should have access to all those big decisions, and there shouldn't be these settlements with gag orders with personnel and directors of people that were making over a certain amount of money. That should be, as soon as you're a manager of any department, that means everything's public.
Yeah.
And you should have to sign off on that, just because
taxpayers are paying the bill.
Taxpayers paying the bill. We should have easy access to that information and no secret settlement deals. Yes,
and like I say, transparency I think needs to be first and foremost with us, because there's this perception out there, and we can as a city council can say, well, no, we're getting the information out there, and well, then either it's not being done properly in getting that information out, or there's too many, it's like a maze to get to the end. And I think we need to make a direct path so I can find out what I want to know about something. I think the website certainly could be indicative of giving more of an open policy to city council business.
Well, speaking of the website there, I've been on it a few times. It's been revamped recently.
Yes,
It's not that difficult. I didn't find
No,
it that
it
hard.
has actually come a long ways.
Yeah.
Because I've noticed that, and I think that's important that we got that done.
Well, yeah, and if you have, if there isn't something there, then you can call and you can find out.
But you can adjust things on there, like any website, right?
Yeah,
You can make adjustments.
Well, is there anything else you want to talk about? Because we covered a lot of ground.
Yes, we covered a lot of ground. Well, I think just from my perspective, my experience in real estate and things like that, I think I can bring something to the table. I do believe I've always said this, that the council and the real estate board need to have a more symbiotic relationship. And we're trying to work towards that, but
Council, chamber, real estate board, and all the other different associations involved with the business of the city.
Yeah, I used to like, I remember when Vic used to have these SWAT teams, or task force, whatever they called. I think we need to get back to doing that. We did one of those for the Quince Museum when we decided to keep it here. And those are the kind of things that are great, because you can we did this one, I remember one on the Heritage Festival. I remember that way back then when Mike Anthony was around, and Mike is a friend of mine, and I really miss him. But he would always listen to me about my ideas, and I said, you need to do some kind of task force. And so he did call it up. And so those are the kind of things I think that are important, people want to know what's going on. And
there's people in town that want to get involved for specific issues and help find a solution.
Yep.
And it doesn't have to be a permanent structure.
No, and I think, short 30 days, 60 days, whatever time. I do believe for the downtown one that I talked about, I'd like to see a permanent task force that coordinates with the health ministry of mental health, all those different groups that are, dealing with vulnerable people. So that we can I know there is a large group, but it's so large, I don't know, I've heard.
It's unwieldy.
It's like 25 people. You can't have committees with 25 people in it, you're not getting nothing done. Everybody wants to have their say, and at the end of the day, you're so tired of listening to all the different opinions. Not you're tired of the opinions, but you're tired because opinion after opinion after opinion, you've got 25 opinions, and okay, well, it's time to go home now because,
you don't get anything done.
You don't get anything done.
You have to keep them to a reasonable number.
And that's what I remember when Vic Fideli had the little task force, I think they were great. They were little small groups, and then they come to do a report to the city, and I think we really got to listen to that, as well as what we talked about is having citizens being able. I don't believe in restricting, that 10-minute, 5-minute rule and all that for presentations. I can understand for the 10-minute, maybe having 3 or 4, whatever it is. But the other individuals should be able to come up. When I was on planning advisory, that's where all rezoning applications used to come, and now it goes directly
to cover that.
Used to come to council. I'd rather have that back in, because when you get people coming before that group, they're not afraid. They'll come up and speak, right? When they're in front of council, the cameras are rolling and all that.
It creates.
They're intimidated. They're intimidated by it, right? It's like
us and them kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like a little David and Goliath kind of thing. And so I really believe with the planning advisory committee should come back into fore, because it allowed people to make their presentations. And when we used to have that committee, if someone would come up and say, I want to do this, and then the next person would come, we'd always say, we don't want to see the same idea, right? If someone's come up with an idea, don't keep repeating it. We understand the idea. Just say, I'm in favor of so-and-so's opinion, and add something to it, because that's what would happen, is people would just repeat the same thing, and then it bogs down the whole committee, and you lose sight of what you're aiming for.
Well, I remember a time when there's an economic development committee, the advisory committee for planning, and things. Those were good training grounds for people that want to get involved with running for council too, right? You got the. So yeah, let's. If there's any answers in the history, that's probably there.
Yeah.
All right. Well. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Good luck on the campaign.
Yes.
Right on.
Appreciate that. Okay.